الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So when we're looking at the great generation of the Tabi'un, those that came after the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, as I mentioned in the last dars, there are so many great examples from the Salihin, from the pious of that generation for us to study and to learn and to look up to and to contemplate our own lives compared to theirs and so on. It's very difficult sometimes to choose who should we talk about first. So I was planning to go through those seven fuqaha of Medina that we had mentioned in the earlier dars and so on. But I came across a hadith in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam called one of the tabi'un khairut tabi'in, yani the best of the tabi'in. Now we mentioned about Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib that he was called Sayyid al-Tabi'in. But this tabi'i is called khairut tabi'in, the best of them, and this was given to him by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now that's strange, because to be a tabi'i and not be a sahabi means that he didn't meet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a sahih hadith called him the best of the tabi'in. So looking at this hadith, and the hadith has some different wordings and so on, but the asl of it is the sahih of Imam Muslim, and no doubt to its authenticity too. I decided to speak about this tabi'i. Imam al-Dhahabi of course calls him by many names, but interestingly, towards the end of the introduction about him, he says min awliya Allah, and he is from the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-muttaqeen. Imam al-Dhahabi, the great scholar of Jarh wa Ta'deel, says about him that he is from the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, regarding awliya, it's a very misunderstood concept. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has awliya, and He has those that He takes as friends, and that is to honor them. Not that Allah needs anybody. But some people, they go to an extreme where they start to praise them past their status, and sometimes give that title to those that may not even deserve it. Somebody who doesn't make salah, somebody who doesn't have a beard, somebody who doesn't follow the sharia, somebody who does other things that are clearly against the sharia openly and so on, and people say he's a wali and they exaggerate him, and they, even after he passes away, they go to his qabr and make dua to him. Na'udhu billah. And this is not the way of the Quran and the Sunnah, this is not the way of the Salaf al-Ummah, this is not the way of the sharia, this is not the way of the Ahlul Sunnah. Other people forget this concept altogether. And if you say this is from the awliya, or may Allah make us from the awliya, or he was from the awliya, immediately they think you're a mubtadi' or something, and they get this allergic reaction, and that's wrong as well. No doubt Allah has awliya. There are ayat in Quran, ahadith and so on that we can talk about for days and days about that and their qualities and so on. But you have to have a balance. Today, we can see somebody and assume that they are good. We take husn dhan, we take the good, we make excuses for our brothers and sisters. We don't assume bad about people. Even though we know that all of us have mistakes, all of us have sins, all of us have shortcomings. But that's not our job. That's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we look at somebody in the masjid, we see somebody giving sadaqah, we see somebody making salah, we assume good about them. But we don't say for sure they're awliya. Allah knows. Yeah. Of course there are awliya today. There will be awliya till the day of judgment. There will be those that Allah gives nusra, the firqa al-najah and mansura and so on. But today we cannot testify for sure. Allah knows best. What do we see? Who sticks to the kitab and sunnah, who sticks to the sharia, who sticks to does their best to follow what Allah has ordained in the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are the alamat, these are the signs for it. But this particular tabi'i, we can attest to him being from the awliya. And we can attest that his dua was accepted. Today we don't know whose dua is accepted. You may see somebody as sinful and their dua is accepted. And you may see somebody as pious and Allah knows best, even though anybody's dua can be accepted. But this particular tabi'i we can say for sure. Why? Because we have daleel, we have hadith. The same thing with the idea of shuhada. Yani those that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said were shuhada and called them shuhada and made the janazah on them and praised them and said they will be in Jannah, we can be sure. Past that, we see somebody dying, fi sabilillah, we say they're shaheed inshallah. And Allah knows the hearts, Allah knows the niyyah and so on. But we judge by the zahir, but we say inshallah. But those that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam attested to, no doubt to it. So Imam al-Dhahabi says, min ibadihi al-mukhlisin, that he was from the ibad of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who were sincere. And just to show you how deep the life of each and every one of the tabi'un and sahaba and a'imma was, entire books were written about them, about their lives. And sometimes entire books just on their virtues. I'm not just talking about Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman, Ali radiallahu anhu. Volumes can be written about those great sahaba. But even this tabi'i, Imam al-Mullah al-Qari, one of the great Hanafi ulama of the past, he wrote Mu'adan al-Adnani fil Fadl Owais Al-Qarni. And this is kind of gives it away. But he wrote a whole book about the virtues of this tabi'i, whose name is Owais Al-Qarni. Owais Al-Qarni is from the land of Yemen. And this is a blessed land. We know that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said about Yemen that this is a place of iman and hikmah and so on. We know there are many virtues about Yemen. And he is from an area, Qaran, yani not some, they take it as Qarni, Qaf, with the Ra sakin and Nun, no with the Ya. It's Qarani, Qaran, Qaf is maftuh, as is the Ra, as is the Nun, and then the Ya. Al-Dhahabi and others, they called him Khair al-Tabi'in, and we'll discuss why. He's also been called Sayyid al-Tabi'in fi zamanihi, as Sa'id al-Musayyib was as well. Imam al-Dhahabi writes about him, Al-Qudwa, the role model, the Zahid. He praised him for the great characteristics that he had. And he says his kunya was Abu Amr. Abu Amr. His name, as well documented by the different scholars of hadith and tarikh and jarh wa ta'deel, is Aws ibn Amir al-Qarani al-Yamani. Even though some books have him as Abdullah, but this is a mistake, because this is something that at times he introduced himself by in order to hide from attention, but that wasn't his actual name. His well-known name is Aws ibn Amir al-Qarani al-Yamani Abu Amr. Now, there are some unique characteristics to him, and the first of them, as I mentioned, that the hadith in Sahih Muslim, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inna khayra tabi'in rajulun." The best of the tabi'un is a person, yuqal lahu Aws. He is called Aws, and he has walida, walahu walida, and he is biha barrun, yani, and he is dutiful to his mother. Subhanallah, this hadith is marfu', yani this is the statement of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it is in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, and it's mentioned in other books of hadith as well. I mean, no doubt that it's come through multiple chains. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions him by name, even though he had not met him, and mentions his virtue, that he is the best of the tabi'un. And there are other fadail that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned about him that we can get into. But also mentions the sabab. What was the reason? The reason was that he was dutiful to his mother. Above all other reasons, that he has many good characteristics, that he was dutiful to his mother. And here, I want to point out something that we may not think about when we hear this hadith, which is this is one of the miracles of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not know this man existed. He did not go to Yemen and meet him. He did not know that he had a mother. He did not know how he is with the mother. This means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was so pleased with Owais Al-Qarni that he sent wahi through Jibreel alayhi salam to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, telling him about this man, and telling him about this virtue, and telling him about this great deed, and telling him about this so that he could convey this to us, which shows us one of the miracles of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It tells us the great honor that's given to Owais Al-Qarni. It tells us the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he sees everything and he knows everything, and he sees that Allah is so pleased with his slave when he is dutiful to his parents. Now, when we talk about Owais Al-Qarni, we know that his father had become a Muslim and that his father had died. His mother raised him and she was blind. Subhanallah, she was challenged. And she was poor. And it was difficult because she had no other family around. But she dedicated her life to her son. And at an age, he got leprosy. And as you know, leprosy is a very serious disease. And this is something that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in ahadith told the Sahaba without ever meeting him, that he had leprosy. And he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah cures him except one little bit the size of a dirham or a dinar. So now first thing, it shows you the power of dua. Historically, the people of Yemen also documented this, that they knew him and they knew about him, and you'll see that later in the dars. And they mentioned, yes, he had leprosy. And without any medical treatment, without any doctors or scientists or any Pfizer or J&J or all these companies, none of that, Allah cured him. Now it doesn't mean that we don't use medicine. No, this is the ummah that uses dawa, they uses the medicine. But it also tells us that Allah is qadir on everything. Medicine is a sabab, dua is a sabab, sadaqah, giving charity is a sabab, good deeds is a sabab. We use the asbab. What sabab did he use? He used dua. And Allah cured him. Except one little size of a dirham or a dinar, both are mentioned in the hadith, size of a coin, and some of the hadith mentioned that it was on his shoulder. Why? Some of the longer narrations mention that was a part of his dua. That, oh Allah, leave that so I can look at it and be thankful to you for curing it. SubhanAllah. How many times have we been through extreme hardships and Allah has cured us? Many of us sitting here maybe went through COVID. I'm not here to judge you. Right? Maybe you went through other harsh diseases. Maybe you went, some people I know in this masjid that went through cancer. And Allah cured us. And today we are here. But do we remember that fadl of Allah, that virtue that Allah, that blessing of Allah? Do you remember that Allah blessed us with this and protected us? So Uwais wanted to remember that blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in the authentic narrations as I mentioned, he told the Sahaba, and this hadith is reported by Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Also in some of the narrations, Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu is also there, that he is being addressed. So who's Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He's speaking to the Sahaba generally, but the two that are specifically being addressed by name is who? Umar ibn Khattab and Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhuma. Two of the greatest of the Sahaba, two of the Khulafa, two of those that are given the glad tidings of Jannah, two that can be considered from the best four that ever existed amongst the Sahaba, two that there is no doubt to their fadl and their virtue. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them that there is a man, and he is the best of the tabi'un, and his name is Owais. In some of the narrations he didn't mention the name, some of them he mentioned his name clearly. And he mentioned that he is from Yemen. And he mentioned that he's dutiful to his mother. In some of the authentic narrations he even mentioned that he had leprosy and Allah cured him, except for the little point. So now, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam clarified all these details about Owais Al-Qarni, then what did he say about him? He says that when he comes to you, ask him to make dua for you. Ask him to make istighfar for you. Now, there is some very deep points that we miss. We hear this, many of you know the story, but we miss some points. One point we miss in Aqidah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah. And he's speaking to those that will be around the qubur of the Sahaba like Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, like Ibn Abbas, like other Sahaba. But he's not saying that go to the dead and ask them to make dua or make tawassul through them. No, he's telling them that a tabi'i is going to come, he's going to be alive, ask him to make istighfar for you. So what is established from the sunnah, yes, you should ask people to make dua for you, the salihin. And Allah knows best, you don't know. Right? But Rasulullah ﷺ didn't teach them to go to the dead, to their qubur and ask them to make dua. Even though a tabi'i is lower in rank than a sahaba. Nobody can say, regarding Owais Al-Qarni, there is a lot of mubalagha as well. You read some of the books of the Sufis and so on, they exaggerate to an extreme. But no sane person could say that he is better than Umar and Ali radiallahu anhu. Umar radiallahu anhu, he is the one that if there was wahi after Rasulullah would come to him, his palace in Jannah, Rasulullah saw his virtues, he mentioned. Ali radiallahu anhu, the one who was in the bed of Rasulullah when he made the hijrah, married to Fatima, the favorite daughter of Rasulullah, Ali ibn Abi Talib from Ahlul Bayt, right? From the Khulafa, no doubt their virtue is higher. But even then Rasulullah is telling them that ask this man, Owais Al-Qarni, to make dua for him. So the first point in Aqidah, if you want to ask somebody to make dua, ask the living. Don't go to the qubur and ask the people. Allah knows best their condition. Secondly, don't think you're better than somebody, so you don't want to ask them to make dua for you. You might be better than them and you might not be better than them. Allah knows best. You might see somebody and you look at their faults, and in reality they have some good deed that Allah loves so much that their dua is accepted. And you may do a lot of good deeds, but you may have something that Allah doesn't love. So first thing, we don't know. But even if you knew that they are lower than you, still go and ask them for dua. When the Sahaba, they heard about this, they were very diligent in following the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they wanted to meet this man, Owais Al-Qarni, and ask him to make dua for them. But they didn't know him. Right? So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, and we'll talk about whether he met Rasulullah or not and all of this, they started to search for him. So anytime a wafd or a delegation would come from Yemen, whether it was in Hajj or whether it was just people coming, they would ask, where are the people of Yemen? They would say, okay, are you from Qarn, the area of this area? They would say yes. Then they would say, is there a man named Uwais amongst you? Is he from Qarn? Does he have a mother? So they would ask these questions to try to find him. And for many years they didn't. One time, and there are again multiple narrations, so I'm just summarizing from them, they found him. In some of the narrations, they actually didn't find him directly. They found a group from his area and they asked them that, is there a man, are you from Yemen? They said yes. Are you from Qarn? They said yes. Are you from this area? They said yes. Is there a man named Uwais amongst you? They said no. They said, is there a man that you know named Uwais? So one of them said, yes, I have a relative. His name is Uwais, but he's like a poor guy. I don't think you're asking about him. He said, did he have leprosy? They said, yes, he did, but Allah cured him. Does he have a mother? Yes. Is he dutiful to her? Yes. They said, take us to him. So in this narration, they actually had to find him. And some of them, they walked up to him. And when they found him, they said, is your name Uwais? He said, yes. In some of the narrations, he even didn't say. They asked him, what's your name? He said, Abdullah. Because he had heard that people were looking for him and he didn't want it. So they told him, no, what did your mother name you? Like, what is your actual name? You know you're the Abd of Allah. And this is the Tawriyah you're doing, we know. But what is your name? He said, Uwais. So are you from the son of Amir? Yes. From Qarn? Yes. Do you have a mother? Yes. Khalas. Did you have leprosy? Yes. Do you have a spot? Yes. Said Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked us, this is Umar and Ali radiallahu anhu. And he from the great Sahaba. to ask you to make istighfar for us, to make dua for us. And he told them, you are the best of the Sahaba, we hear about you, we came to see you, why would you ask me? He said, no. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us to ask you to make dua for us. Now, why was he not a Sahaba? Now, I know most of you know this, but there are some aspects to it to understand. We know that he was Muslim during the lifetime of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we know he had a great desire to go see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we know from many ahadith that he had tried to go to see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and people from Yemen had gone and they had seen the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they had raised themselves to the rank of Sahaba in the state of Iman. They saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and died in that state, so they're Sahaba. But he had no family, and his mother was blind, and she was old, and she was unable to take care of herself, so he stayed with her. In some of the narrations, he even asked her for permission to go. And she told him go, but she told him don't stay long, because at that time it wasn't like you jump on a flight, right? Some of the ulama said the journey from Yemen to Medina could take up to a month. Whether that's both ways or one way or either way, that's a long time. So she told him, if you go, don't stay more than 3 days. In some of the narrations, they actually mention 3 days. Now this is an interesting point in fiqh as well. You know, when we go through these durus, we should always benefit from the aspects of aqaid and fiqh and things to take from it as well. Earlier we also talked about, in the earlier dars, about those Sahaba that wouldn't stay at a place more than 3 days, because expecting that after the fourth you would become muqim. Yeah? The hadith in Sahih Muslim about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about when hijrah was made for, that's another dalil as well. But this is another dalil, even though it's from the tabi'un, but it's an additional evidence. So she said, don't stay more than 3 days. If you go stay for that time, don't become a resident. Just go there, see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and come back. And he told her, okay. When he got to Medina, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was out of Medina. He was out for jihad and so on. And this is, and it happens. Many times people come to San Diego to meet, and unfortunately brothers are traveling and so on. It happens all the time. And this is how life is. And at that time he couldn't text back to his mother, mom, you know, the Prophet Isa is not here, can I stay longer? Because he couldn't, he obeyed his mother and he went back. He ended up not seeing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, I looked at the different ahadith. And again, as I mentioned, the books of hadith and the books of tariq like Siyar Alam al-Nubala and others are filled with narrations about Owais Al-Qarni. So, when you look at his response in some of the narrations, it's also very interesting. Meaning when the Sahaba asked him to make dua for him, specifically Umar and Ali radiallahu anhuma, he didn't just make dua. In one of the narrations, he tells them your virtue and he praises them, but they tell him no. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, we're going to ask you for dua, please make dua for us. So when he was about to make dua, he said, oh Allah, they have come with this hope that you will forgive them. Not because of me, not because of my dua, but because of this hope, oh Allah, forgive them. Yani they have this idea that this dua is accepted, so Allah keep their heart and keep their love that they have and accept this dua and forgive them. Yani he didn't praise himself with it either. It's a beautiful way that he made the dua. Now, we know this narration well. Anybody that's heard of Owais Al-Qarni knows this hadith. And it's very famous, and it's sahih, and it's in the books, and there are lectures, and there are whole series done on it. But people miss that there is a lot more to him than just this. This is what I want to talk about a little bit today. Unusual from most durus. Every dars about him will discuss this narration, no doubt. Yeah? But there is more to him. But as a warning, as Ibn Jawzi, he says most of the narrations that were mentioned about Owais Al-Qarni are mawdu', are fabricated. For example, there is one that's going around YouTube, and then all these are people talk about, where they say when he heard that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam broke his tooth, he pulled out or broke or plucked out all his teeth. This is a fabrication. There is no sanad for this. In fact, to do such a thing would be against the Sharia. The awliya are not those that violate the Sharia. And everybody has sins and mistakes. I'm not saying even a wali of Allah can make a mistake. I'm not saying that they have to be perfect. They're not anbiya, they're not malaika. But in their ibadah, they don't go against the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's not from the sunnah that if you hear Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam broke his tooth, you pull out all your teeth. No. This body is not yours to mess with. So these are narrations that we need to be warned against. Now, there are some authentic narrations that mention his virtue, and Imam al-Nawawi, because I told you the hadith that is about him is in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, and Imam al-Nawawi wrote the famous sharh, explanation of Sahih Muslim. He gives a whole bab in his sharh to the virtues and the story and the narrations about Owais Al-Qarni. And Al-Hakim, he also gives a whole chapter about this. And as I mentioned, Mullah al-Qari also wrote a risala on this and so on. So from some of the authentic narrations, and Shaykh Albani, for example, he looked at this narration and authenticated it, as did Mullah al-Qari and other earlier ai*imma and ulama. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, from my ummah, there is a person that due to his dua, Allah will enter Jannah of people, vast number of people in my ummah, like the Banu Tamim, the tribe of Banu Tamim, which was a very big tribe. And Al-Hasan al-Basri, as Al-Hafiz ibn Nu'aym and others have mentioned, that he said that this person being referred to is Owais Al-Qarni. Now Hasan al-Basri is an early tabi'i, so his qawl is the hujjah. But even the later ulama, when they went through this hadith's explanation, they said yes, what is indicated that no doubt this was the narration about Owais Al-Qarni. From the interesting aspects to his life, Abu Nu'aym in the Hilyat al-Awliya, he mentions this, and other ai*imma and ulama have mentioned this in their books of Jarh wa Ta'deel and the biographies that mention about him. And no doubt that he was an authentic reporter and narrator, even though he's not in many asanid, but his biography is there. That later he moved to Kufa, and many of the ulama said is because his mother had passed away, and the people around him had started to always ask him for dua. It became a nuisance to him, because the hadith became famous, and the Sahaba like Ali and Umar radiallahu anhuma had asked him, and obviously the news had spread. Everybody would come to him, make dua for him, make dua for him, make dua for me, to a point that he didn't want to be, and he bothered all the time. He just wanted to learn knowledge and teach and make his ibadah. So he moved to Kufa, and he kept a very low profile there. But he would go to the halaqat of ilm. But the fitan in the ummah began. And there are times when there is peace and there is tranquility and there is you're left alone, and the da'wah flourishes and Islam flourishes and there is amazing unity and so on. But this dunya is such that you always get tested. There's always going to be some person of hasad, somebody that's going to try to cause problems and so on. So same thing happened with him. In Kufa, many people, due to some political reasons and some other reasons, and him speaking haqq and so on, they started to speak ill of him and to mock him and to give him a hard time and so on. But he would continue to seek knowledge. So one of the narrators, he mentioned that I went to Kufa and I sat with one of the scholars of hadith that was teaching hadith. In Kufa there used to be halaqat of fiqh, halaqat of kalam and good and bad, and halakat where they would teach hadith and tafsir and so on. So he said, I went to the halaqah that was teaching hadith, and I saw one person sitting there that after the halaqah he went and spoke to the teacher, but his words were amazing. Like what he was saying was amazing. So I asked this teacher about this man. He said, don't worry about it. And he didn't want to highlight it. But he said, I went one time and I saw that that student was not there for the halaqah, but he used to always be there. He was regular. So I asked, where is he? So the teacher said, this is Owais Al-Qarni, and I don't know where he is. So I asked where he lived, and I went to his house and I found him there. And I told him, why did you miss the halaqah? He said, because he only had the izar and rada. He had the low-end cloth and the upper cloth, and he didn't have many clothing. And he had washed his clothes and he was waiting for them to dry, and he didn't want to go out just with the izar to the masjid and to the people of knowledge. So he was waiting for the upper cloth to dry. So this man told him, if you wanted, I would have given you mine. I have extra. He told him, no, I don't want to wear yours. I'm going to wait. He told him, while you're waiting, you'll miss the knowledge. So he took the rida from this other student, because the student had more cloth, and he went. But when he was going, the people started to mock him. Where did you steal that? Who did you get that from? Where did you trick somebody from? Subhanallah, ajib, jealousy. This is a man who is called Khairul Tabi'een in hadith. This is a man that no doubt his dua is accepted. This is a man Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam praised. This is the man that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the Sahaba to ask him for dua, and the people were making these accusations against him. So that student, when he heard this, he went and he got upset. And the people said, yeah, we know he doesn't have money. Where would he get it? Because it was mine. Why would you think bad about him? Subhanallah. Owais Al-Qarni, he has some beautiful sayings, and I'm going to end with just some of these sayings. He said, begin every day with the hub of Allah, with the love of Allah. And end every day with the hamd of Allah, with the thankfulness of Allah. You begin the day, is the beginning, have that love for Allah. You're ending the day, think of all that Allah has blessed you with, all that Allah has protected you with, that you don't even know that could have come down your way, that didn't happen, thank Allah. Every day begin and end like this. As I mentioned, and Abu Nu'aym and others have mentioned this, that Owais Al-Qarni, Al-Yamani, only had an izar and rada. And at times he would have a qamis, like which we call a thawb, and sometimes, but he would have very few clothing. But when he would be eating his small meals, wearing that minimum clothing, he would be asking Allah for forgiveness, that, oh Allah, I know there are people that are hungry and I'm eating, forgive me that I couldn't give them. And he would ask Allah for forgiveness, saying, oh Allah, forgive me, I know there are people that don't have this cloth and I'm wearing this cloth, forgive me that I didn't give it. SubhanAllah. These are the awliya. These are the Salaf al-Salihin. These are the beautiful examples we should look up to. And Hakim, he mentions a narration from Owais Al-Qarni that he said, and again this is with saying that the beginning, the intro, explaining that you should have hope in the mercy of Allah. Always hope in the mercy of Allah. Allah loves us. But he said, fear the punishment of Allah as if you've murdered all the people. All of mankind, you've killed them. Like, don't think, oh, I did this, but so what? Oh, this is small, this is... No. When you fear the punishment of Allah, think as if you have murdered all of mankind. Abu Nu'aym, in Hilyatul Awliya, he says that he fought in jihad and he continued to teach whatever he knew from wisdom and knowledge and hadith, even though he didn't become like a famous teacher of hadith like Sa'id al-Musayyib and so on, but he would be sitting and benefiting from ulama, and then even if it was amongst only his friends, he would be sharing that knowledge. Abu Nu'aym says that he became shaheed in Azerbaijan, and this is the opinion of many of the ulama. They have mentioned that he fought alongside Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma in Azerbaijan and he became shaheed there. But the Jamhur, Al-Hakim and others have mentioned that he became shaheed in the Battle of Siffin on the side of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. Either which way, he died in battle, and he lived a life of zuhud, of wisdom. And interestingly, his grave, one of them is in Oman. So either he died in Sham, Siffin is in Sham, in Syria, current day Syria, Raqqa, around there, or possibly in Azerbaijan. I don't know how his grave would be in Oman. They do have a grave in Raqqa as well for him, and they've decorated and built on it against the Sunnah and so on. But majority of the ulama said we don't know that to be the place. Allah knows best where he's buried. But wherever he's buried, may Allah bless his grave, may Allah bless his akhirah. We know that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam praised him, so we know that he's going to be from the people who are the people of Jannah, and he's from the people whose dua is accepted, and so on. Many lessons we can take from his life. I'm just going to end with 3. One, of course, being dutiful to your parents, especially a mother that spent and sacrificed so much, that you see the beautiful example that his mother made and how he honored her and respected her. Amazing. It brought the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, the dedication he had to knowledge. He didn't just say, okay, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam praised me, my dua is accepted, Allah entered Jannah, I'm done. Being called Khairut Tabi'een by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us that whichever alim that was, whose halaqah he was sitting in Kufa, was not as good as him. Right? Meaning, who that alim was, we don't even know. This particular, they don't mention the teacher. Right? He was teaching hadith, he was a scholar of hadith, he was in Kufa. Right? But Owais Al-Qarni was obviously of greater status, but he would still go there and sit and benefit and talk and not try to show off into it. And the last thing, he didn't let this dunya get in the way. Meaning, even, not just talking about dunya in the sense of money and wealth and power, but even when people ridiculed him, even when people criticized him unjustly, he didn't start responding to them and going down to their level and ruining his iman and akhirah and teaching and learning because of their unjust criticism. He kept his focus. He didn't respond to them. And he died, subhanallah, fighting fi sabilillah. So we hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he is an example that we can take from, inshallah, from the great tabi'un. And we'll end here, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khair.